Sometimes the distance between life-saving care and death in cases of lupus lies with the health worker. On this edition of the GLF podcast, we will discuss the large role that health workers play in lupus care. So, hello and welcome to the GLF podcast. As you know, it's called. My name is Alu Azege, and I'm excited to be your host here. And thank you for always keeping the date with us. Whether you're a health worker, a caregiver, or someone simply passionate about health, especially women's health, this is for you. Today's episode is dedicated to discussing the roles of health workers and the very vital importance they play in getting well, especially for lupus patients. So thank you so much for joining us on this next episode of the GLF podcast. Founder of the Gift Lupus Foundation, Dr. Lovett Ononuga.
Thank you so much, Anu. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. I'm so excited. Last month was amazing, and I'm looking forward to another amazing, a time in the studio here with you today.
Right. Now, you take us through the amazing time you had in the month of May. Talk to us about the awareness month for lupus.
Yes. As you know, May is Lupus Awareness Month and is celebrated globally. So every year, the foundation has a series of events to commemorate the World Lupus Day, which is actually on May 10th. So this year, we decided to have a lupus awareness lunch, and it was amazing. I can tell you that because we got together both special advocates, that's those suffering from the lupus condition, as well as experts to come and talk to us about lupus. The whole idea was to talk about lupus over lunch,
right?
And this happened at my residence. So it was a very relaxed atmosphere, well attended. In fact, in the end, we had more people than I, actually was expecting, but it was all good. It was a very exciting time. Dr. Kene was the main speaker, the president of the Association of Public Health Physicians or Practitioners of Nigeria. He was the main speaker. He talked about lupus. He mentioned about the link to vitamin D deficiency. We even had a very fun sunshine break. That was my highlight, and I know that a lot of people loved that. The food was great as well.
Yes, it was. I was there myself, and yes, I would say it was.
Yeah. So it was a nice month, and then of course we had 2 episodes of. We launched the GLF podcast last month.
Yay.
As part of the activities, and that has been well received. And so a lot of the patients felt encouraged, and that was for me the most important thing, because all this is about making lupus visible together. So they felt very encouraged and hopeful for the future of lupus in Nigeria. And we're looking for so many amazing things. Partnerships where we sealed our partnership last month. We had an MOU with, we signed an MOU with the Association of Public Health Physicians of Nigeria, and another one in view with Excel Hospital, Abuja, so all good things, and I've been getting a lot of positive feedback from people who not only attended the awareness lunch, but also partners online on all our various social media handles. So yes, May was good.
Great. I was there, like I said, and for me also, one of the high points was listening to those people living with lupus, and you could literally see that for them it was the light at the end of the tunnel. They were excited to be the focal point. Yes. I was happy to see many of them. I was happy to see how they were being received and very open also to speak about their lived realities.
Absolutely.
So yeah.
Because it takes courage to be able to talk about this sort of situation, medical condition.
Right.
So I was really impressed with how courageous they were and open.
Right.
It was nice, yes.
Okay. On this episode, I and Dr. Lovett Ononuga, here the founder of the GLF Foundation, who has dedicated her life to raising awareness about lupus, will discuss the role of health workers, what they play in improving the level of care for people living with lupus. You'll agree with me that that is a very core part of that whole process. It's interesting that despite affecting millions of people worldwide, lupus is still relatively unknown compared to many other chronic illnesses, even autoimmune illnesses. Awareness can literally mean the difference between early intervention and years of uncertainty. And so we often hear stories of patients being treated for several different conditions before eventually learning they have lupus. And you heard her talk about it in the other editions. That delay can be physically, emotionally, and financially draining. And you heard her talk to us about it. Many people living with lupus often go years without diagnosis. What role do health workers play in helping patients get diagnosed earlier?
Thank you so much, Anu, for shining the light on this particular aspect of it, because it is really a key aspect of making lupus visible, okay, and saving lives. It is. You know, when you are sick and you go to see a doctor, you first of all have to see a general doctor. It's the general doctor that points you to probably a specialist. And if that general doctor does not point you to the right specialist or prescribe the right test for you, you know that your journey to recovery is stalled, right? Now, the same thing happens when somebody has lupus, and this is the role, the critical role that healthcare providers play. At that initial stage, or the first visit or encounter with a doctor or even a nurse or any healthcare provider at all, it is important that the healthcare providers maintain a very high level of suspicion. That suspicion level needs to be, a high index of suspicion such that they ask the right questions. Don't just assume that this is another case of malaria or typhoid, because malaria and typhoid are not the only sicknesses or diseases that can affect people, because that's what literally happens in our Nigerian medical world, So ask the right questions, be suspicious, at the back of your mind, especially listen to the patient without shutting out what the patient is saying. Actually listen and engage with the patient, to listen to all that they have to say. Take notes and recognize patterns of symptoms, so, and then you can then refer the patients for the right tests,
right,
and to also see the right consultants or specialists for confirmation of whatever it is that you are suspecting. Now, when I say recognize the patterns, obviously there are patterns that all healthcare providers need to look out for. For instance, you might want to say, okay, what are the patterns? Maybe we can talk about that.
Yeah.
What
It'll
are
be
the
good to talk
patterns?
about these patterns. I know you mentioned a few in the past, but and I do know also that doctors should know. What worries me is, indeed, why don't they follow this pattern?
Yeah. So at the awareness launch, you may have heard Dr. Kene address this particular topic, this particular question, this concern. And it's not that doctors, when they go through medical school, do not know about this condition. They know about lupus. There's no one that passes through medical school that does not know about lupus. And Dr. Kene confirmed that, but right afterwards, it seems like they just forget about it. This is why we say that lupus is invisible disease. Do you understand? Because nobody because it's rare. And so doctors just don't query it. That's why I said maintain a high index of suspicion is the first step. Now, what are the patterns? Persistent fatigue. Try and talk to the patient. Ask about, the symptoms and record them, put them down, put the notes down. Joint pains. How long has this been going on? Unexpected flares or fevers, mouth ulcers. It's possible that someone can walk into the hospital to see a doctor, complain of mouth ulcers, and the doctor just prescribes antibiotics and sends you home without querying further to find out what other patterns of symptoms are you going through, to connect the dots, right? So inflammation of multiple organs. So you come in with complaining of inflammation in multiple organs or just body pains, because inflammation usually shows up as body pains. And then you can't even most times, patient can't really figure out what part of my body is hurting. It's like they feel pain everywhere, so those are the kind of things to look out for. So doctors need to look out for these sort of symptoms, because one other thing is that these symptoms are also symptoms for many other conditions. But what we're saying is that if you maintain a high level of suspicion concerning lupus, that lupus is out there, lupus is real, you can then refer for the appropriate testing to be done. That will now save that patient's life or lead to an early diagnosis. That's what we're saying.
Okay. Thank you so much for that education. It brings us to better understanding of some of these symptoms, and it makes one wonder why indeed health workers haven't been able to go through that. I mean, you've spoken about the symptoms already. So when we talk about healthcare, we sometimes focus only on treatment, right? But for people living with chronic conditions, emotional support, clear communication, and empathy can be just as important. So beyond diagnosis and medication, let's talk about this. Why do health workers need to give an extra level of care when it comes to lupus patients? Really?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Alu. That's another thing I'm so happy to talk about, because we need to shine the light on that. So it's not just the treatment. Because lupus is a chronic condition. That means it's a lifelong. Most people live with it forever because there's no cure. Right? So if you have a chronic condition that you have to manage, you have to live with all your life, you can imagine how that impacts on every area of your life. So the treatment can alleviate your symptoms, but it cannot cure it. So you are like living with this condition all your life. So you do need empathy. You need people to understand you and to be patient with you and to emotionally support you, because it's not easy. It's very difficult to have to manage those kind of symptoms, because it impacts every area of your life. For instance, your ability to work, you may not be able to work. So just the fact that you cannot be like other people and just go to work and earn a living is debilitating enough. Do you understand? So you need people who are empathic and understand this, that you are not, it's not because you don't want to work, it's because you have a condition that makes it look like you are okay, but really you are not okay. Do you understand? So a lot of empathy is required, a lot of understanding patients by the healthcare providers, as well as anyone with responsibility for care for these people, whether it's your family, do you understand? Especially family, because most times, because it's a chronic condition, you're in and out of hospital, so you have contact with professional carers when you are in the hospital setting, and then you are back home with your family. So you need these two sets of carers to be very empathic and understanding, to be patient, do you understand? And understand that you are going through something that is not only physically impacting you, it is also impacting your your emotional well-being, your psychological well-being, of course your physiological well-being because you are sick, but the emotional part of it and the psychological part of it needs care and attention too. And carers need to be conscious of this, and they need to understand that it's an all-round care that is required, not just medication.